Go back in the time machine a little bit. Susan Smith, this is the mother who drowned her children, uh, but for many, many days claimed that they had been kidnapped. Uh, Prosecutors argue that Smith's deteriorating mental health led her to kill her children. It was supported by documented history of depression. Well, surprisingly enough, she's up for parole. This will be, I believe, her third attempt at going in front of the parole board, trying to get out. And November is when that will be taking place. Joining me to discuss, Eric Faddis, defense attorney, former prosecutor. What do you think the odds here of Susan getting out at this point? Obviously, been denied two other times in 2020 and 2015. Is the third time the charm here for Susan Smith?
I think she's got a shot here. When we look at it, it's been, 3 decades since the crime that she committed.
Yeah.
Certainly was heinous, and she took measures to cover it up, which makes it worse.
Yeah.
That being said, there's been a lot that's happened since then, and she's alleging she's been rehabilitated, that sort of thing. This isn't like a mass murder in terms of like a school shooting or something, although there were multiple deaths. Does she have a shot? I think it depends on what that parole board is thinking, but I think she's in the running.
It's bizarre to me how our system works, where the value of life changes. Seemingly depending on the crime and the person. Like these are two people; they'd be 30 today if they were alive, or maybe a little bit older at this point. Um, eh, just innocent kids murdered by their own mother. Why is she even up for parole? I guess why did she even have the grace that they gave her back in those days?
Yeah, I think she would argue, and her attorneys would argue that hey, there's been a mass incarceration problem in the United States. She's been in prison for 30 years. Perhaps the social climate has changed. Perhaps cultural views on incarceration have changed. Perhaps we should look at this with a new lens. At least that's what her team is going to argue.
Yeah, I mean they have argued, all they've argued that they've said, she was suffering from depression. Again, not an excuse to kill somebody. Highlighting her troubled childhood, sexual abuse by her stepfather, which may have contributed to the psychological breakdown. I get it. Mental health is a big thing, but at the end of the day, she killed her kids and then lied about it. I mean, if it was a mental break, I know we're talking 30 years ago, so things were looked at very different then. But I mean, if it was a mental break, I guess that could be argued. But then you continue to go on with the story, and you employ the help of the authorities and the public to try and help find these kids. I mean, it's a horrible, horrible thing. It reminds me a bit of the what's her name, the woman who disappeared from her husband, and no one died in that case. I want to say Panini or something, but
Yes,
you know what
I
I'm
know who
talking
you're
about?
talking about.
Blonde girl. Yeah.
Yes.
I know it's not Panini, but I know I'm close. There's something Nini in there. Anyway, it reminds me of that, where it's like you get all these people involved, you name these suspects, all this resource goes in, and then 30 years later, like, oh well, you can get out. You killed some people in this case though, and she got out because no one was dead. I mean, these are not sane people. These are not necessarily the type of people we want to put back into society, I would think, rehabilitated or not. I mean, can you really rehabilitate someone who consciously murders their children?
It's a very fair question. I think different psychologists might have different views on that.
Yeah.
But I think what's going to plague her on these parole hearings is kind of what you touched on. Not only these gruesome murders of these vulnerable, innocent people who looked at her for protection, but also the deception following it. And the use of resources from the government that were all for naught because these kids were already dead.
Yeah.
And so I think that they're going to look at that and say, hey, that adds insult to injury, and that's going to be weighed heavily in terms of whether she gets parole.
I know her former partner, the father of the kids, has been at all the parole hearings, strictly advocating to keep her behind bars. I'm guessing he's going to be here again to advocate for that. I mean, this could go on endlessly. She could spend the rest of her life in prison potentially, couldn't she?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And the father's position is likely going to be granted significant weight by the parole board, they often look to the victims or the victim's representative and how they're feeling about things. There are other cases where the victim's family has said, hey, enough is enough and we're fine with this person being out. It's rare, but it happens.
Yeah.
That's not the case here. And I think that that's going to be just an additional mark against her, making it less likely that she'll get parole.
Another fateful day coming up in November for Susan Smith. We'll have to see how that goes. Hey, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to follow us wherever you download podcasts, and especially Apple Podcasts, where you can get advanced episode and premium content on our premium channel right there. Also, be sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss any breaking updates on the stories that matter to you most. We're on TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook. Just search Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski, and you'll find us right there. Again, thanks for watching.